The night of July 7th, 2017, began like countless others at San Francisco International Airport. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple as the bustle of arriving and departing flights continued. Passengers, weary from travel or excited for new adventures, streamed through the terminals. Air traffic controllers, their voices calm and measured, guided these aircraft with precision. Yet, on this seemingly ordinary night, an extraordinary event was about to unfold. This is the story of Air Canada Flight 759, a routine flight from Toronto to San Francisco, and its harrowing near collision on runway 28 right. An event that would push the limits of human skill and technology. It's a story that underscores the vital importance of communication, vigilance, and the unwavering commitment to safety that underpins the world of aviation. Nestled on the edge of San Francisco Bay, SFO is a gateway to the Pacific Rim and a vital hub for air travel in North America. Its 4 runways, including the notorious runway 28 right, handle a constant stream of aircraft. The airport's complex layout demands the utmost precision from pilots and air traffic controllers alike. On a clear day, the views from the cockpit are breathtaking, offering panoramic vistas of the Golden Gate Bridge and Alcatraz Island. But beauty can be deceiving, and the skies above SFO can be unforgiving, especially at night. The combination of heavy air traffic, complex airspace, and the ever-present fog creates a challenging environment. On this particular night, the air was calm and visibility was good. Runway 28 right, the stage for this near disaster, stretches for over 2 miles. To the south of 28 right lies taxiway C, a parallel stretch of asphalt used by aircraft to taxi to and from the gates. On this night, taxiway C was unusually crowded, with 4 passenger jets awaiting their turn to take off. Air Canada Flight 759 was a routine flight, but on this night, it carried a precious cargo of human lives and stories. On board were families returning from vacations, business travelers heading to meetings, and individuals embarking on new chapters in their lives. Each passenger had their own reasons for being on that flight. Among the passengers were seasoned travelers and first-time flyers. There were couples holding hands, friends sharing stories, and parents comforting restless children. Each life on board was entrusted to the skill and judgment of the flight crew. Captain, as Captain Sullivan, pre-landing checklist complete. In the cockpit, Captain Sullivan and First Officer Source went through their pre-landing checklists. They were both experienced aviators, highly trained and well-equipped to handle the demands of commercial aviation. The flight had been smooth, the skies clear, and the approach to SFO was proceeding as planned. Air traffic control had cleared Flight 759 to land on runway 28 right. As the Airbus descended through 2,000 feet, the lights of San Francisco twinkled below. At 11:55 p.m. PDT, Air Canada Flight 759 descended through the inky blackness towards the welcoming glow of SFO's runway lights. From the cockpit, the city's glittering grid appeared deceptively close. Captain Sullivan, his gaze alternating between his instruments and the approaching runway, noted the familiar landmarks. The Airbus, responding smoothly to Sullivan's gentle adjustments, glided down through 1,600 feet. First Officer, as First Officer Source, altitude and airspeed confirmed. First Officer Source, his eyes scanning the instrument panel, confirmed their altitude and airspeed. Everything about the approach felt routine, familiar, almost automatic. Yet deep within Sullivan, a primal instinct whispered that something wasn't quite right. The runway lights, normally distinct points of reference, seemed oddly clustered. Sullivan, his brow furrowed slightly, strained to make sense of the visual input. He'd landed at SFO countless times, knew the approach like the back of his hand. But tonight something felt different. The usual visual cues, the spacing of the lights, the distinct separation between the runway and the parallel taxiway were somehow off. Captain, as Captain Sullivan. "Confirm runways clear," Sullivan said, his voice betraying the slightest hint of uncertainty. First Officer, as First Officer Source. "Tower, confirm runways clear. Air Traffic Control, Air Canada 759, cleared to land." High above the runway, in the darkened silence of the control tower, Air Traffic Controller Larry Kilgore watched the blip representing Air Canada 759 descend steadily on his radar screen. Kilgore, a veteran controller with years of experience guiding aircraft through SFO's notoriously challenging airspace, prided himself on his ability to anticipate potential conflicts. His eyes, trained to detect even the slightest deviation from the norm, followed the trajectory of Flight 759 as it approached runway 28R. The flight path looked normal, the descent rate within parameters. But something about the aircraft's position, its proximity to the adjacent taxiway, triggered a flicker of unease in Kilgore's gut. Taxiway C, he knew, was unusually congested tonight, with 4 fully loaded passenger jets awaiting their turn to take off.
"Where's this guy going?"
Kilgore muttered to himself, his eyes glued to the radar screen. His unease morphed into full-blown alarm as he watched the blip representing Flight 759 drift dangerously close to the line representing Taxiway C. He double-checked the aircraft's altitude, its heading, his mind racing to comprehend the unfolding situation.
"Tower, we got an aircraft. Looks like he's lined up for Charlie."
Kilgore, his worst fears confirmed, felt a surge of adrenaline. Inside the cockpit of Air Canada 759, Captain Sullivan continued his descent, his unease growing with every passing second. The runway lights were still confusingly close together, the usual visual cues absent. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Then a voice, calm but insistent, crackled over the radio, breaking the tense silence of the cockpit. It wasn't the familiar voice of the air traffic controller. It was the pilot of a United Airlines aircraft, his voice heavy with disbelief and a tinge of alarm.
"Where's this guy going? He's on the taxiway."
The message, brief but chilling, cut through the routine chatter of air traffic control like a siren in the night. Sullivan's blood ran cold. He instantly understood the gravity of their situation. They were not lined up with the runway. They were about to land on Taxiway C. The realization hit Sullivan and First Officer Source like a physical blow. In that instant, all the routine procedures, the years of training, the countless hours of experience crystallized into a single, overwhelming imperative. Avoid a catastrophic collision.
"Go around, Air Canada, go around."
The urgent command from the tower, echoing the United pilot's previous warning, left no room for doubt. Sullivan, his instincts taking over, reacted instantly. Inside the cockpit of Air Canada 759, the atmosphere crackled with tension. The Airbus A320, moments away from a catastrophic touchdown on Taxiway C, shuddered as Captain Sullivan slammed the throttle levers forward, pushing the engines to their limits. The sudden surge of power jolted the aircraft, throwing the passengers back against their seats. First Officer Source, his eyes darting between his instruments and the windshield, felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as they initiated the go-around. Outside, the peaceful stillness of the San Francisco night was shattered by the Airbus's engines roaring back to life. The sound, a deafening crescendo of power and urgency, reverberated across the airfield.
"Positive climb, gear up," Sullivan commanded, his voice firm despite the tension gripping his gut. He pulled back on the control yoke, coaxing the heavy Airbus into the night sky. The ground, illuminated by the runway and taxiway lights, seemed to fall away beneath them as they climbed.
"Gear up, positive climb," he echoed, his voice steady.
Their training, years of practice for precisely this type of emergency, kicked in, overriding the fear that threatened to consume them.
Air Canada is going around?
Back in the control tower, a wave of confusion and disbelief rippled through the room as the controllers watched the blip representing Air Canada 759 abruptly veer off its course. One moment, it had seemed destined for a catastrophic collision with the aircraft on Taxiway C. The next, it was climbing back into the night sky.
Air Canada is going around?
One of the controllers exclaimed, his voice tinged with disbelief. Kilgore, his heart pounding in his chest, could only nod, his eyes glued to the radar screen as he tracked the Airbus's ascent.
Air Canada 759, what are your intentions?
Kilgore's voice, usually calm and controlled, betrayed a hint of urgency. Finally, Sullivan's voice, calm and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins, broke the silence.
Air Canada 759, going around, we thought we were cleared to land.
On the ground, passengers aboard the United Airlines 787 had a front-row seat to the near disaster. They watched in horror as the Air Canada Airbus descended towards them. They braced for impact, the terrifying reality sinking in.
Oh my God, we're going to die!
The Airbus pulled up sharply, narrowly clearing their aircraft. The force of the Airbus's engines buffeted the United jet. As Air Canada 759 climbed away from the brightly lit tableau of taxiway C, the initial shock of the near miss began to give way to a chilling realization. Climbing back to a safe altitude would be a slow and laborious process.
759, climb and maintain 3000, turn left heading 220.
Kilgore's voice aimed to guide the Airbus away from the congested airspace.
Climbing 3,000, turning left 220, Air Canada 759.
Sullivan repeated, acknowledging the instructions. He eased the Airbus into a gentle left turn. Inside the cabin, the sudden roar of the engine startled the passengers awake. The seatbelt sign, still illuminated, flashed a stark reminder. As Air Canada 759 leveled off at 3,000 feet, the city lights of San Francisco twinkling below, a palpable sense of relief settled in the cockpit. They had averted disaster, but the gravity of what had almost transpired weighed heavily on the minds of Captain Sullivan and First Officer Sauce.
Air Canada 759, you're cleared for a second approach, runway 28R.
Kilgore's voice, calm and steady, cut through the tense silence. He knew that the crew had just been through a harrowing experience, but he had faith in their professionalism.
Cleared for the approach, runway 28R, Air Canada 759.
Sullivan replied, his voice betraying a hint of weariness. Down below, the city of San Francisco seemed to hold its breath. Inside the cockpit of Air Canada 759, a heavy silence hung in the air, punctuated only by the quiet hum of the instruments. Captain Sullivan guided the Airbus through its second approach to runway 28R, his face etched with concentration. The near miss weighed heavily on his mind. First Officer Sauce mirrored Sullivan's focus. Gone was the easy banter that had filled the cockpit earlier. They were acutely aware that the eyes of the world were upon them. Below them, San Francisco shimmered under a moonlit sky. News of the near miss spread like wildfire, a digital wave of shock and disbelief. The Airbus, responding smoothly to Sullivan's expert touch, descended through the darkness, its landing lights cutting through the night like beacons. The runway lights, once a source of confusion and terror, now appeared as welcome guides.
Easy, Victor, easy does it,
Sullivan murmured, his voice barely audible above the whisper of the wind. The Airbus touched down gently on the tarmac, its tires kissing the runway with a soft chirp. As Air Canada Flight 759 taxied towards the gate, the enormity of what they had just experienced began to sink in. A wave of relief mixed with disbelief washed over the cabin.
Nervous chatter replaced the stunned silence.
Cell phones emerged, glowing with messages from loved ones.
Flight attendants, their professionalism unwavering, moved through the cabin.
The air crackled with relief, gratitude, and a newfound appreciation for life.
We just avoided landing on top of 4 airplanes.
As the passengers disembarked, their faces pale with lingering shock, they were met by a phalanx of airport personnel. The story of Air Canada Flight 759 had spread through the airport like wildfire. Among the passengers, there was a palpable sense of disbelief.
We just avoided landing on top of 4 airplanes.
Word of the near miss spread beyond the confines of SFO, racing across the globe on the wings of the internet. And in the cockpit of Air Canada Flight 759, now silent and empty, the instruments flickered off. A night that would forever be etched in the annals of aviation history. As the sun rose over San Francisco Bay, casting its golden light on the Golden Gate Bridge, a sense of relief settled over the city. Air Canada Flight 759, now a symbol of resilience, was safely at its gate, its passengers and crew bound by their shared experience. The city exhaled, urban life resuming as commuters made their way to work and tourists embarked on adventures. Yet, the near-catastrophic miss at SFO lingered like a ghost, a whisper of what might have been. At the NTSB, the task of unravelling the events that brought Flight 759 to the brink of disaster was just beginning. Investigators, driven by a commitment to uncovering the truth, descended upon SFO, marking the start of a meticulous inquiry. The investigation would involve analysing flight data, scrutinising air traffic control recordings, and reconstructing events. Investigators would dissect radar data, cockpit conversations, and interview key personnel to piece together a comprehensive narrative. The world watched, the story of Flight 759 capturing global anxieties about modern aviation and potential errors. The investigation held profound implications for the future of air travel, shaping industry practices and regulations for years to come. The NTSB investigation revealed a complex interplay of human error and systemic vulnerabilities that led to the near collision at SFO. Air Canada Flight 759's perilous approach was a symptom of factors that could create similar scenarios in the future. Miscommunications between the pilots and air traffic controllers were at the heart of the near miss. Fatigued pilots misidentified taxiway C as runway 28R. Their situational awareness was compromised by fatigue and lack of clear visual cues. Controllers, operating under high pressure, failed to provide clear instructions. The NTSB identified systemic vulnerabilities, including SFO's layout and lighting system. The near collision of Air Canada Flight 759 served as a catalyst for positive change within the aviation industry. SFO implemented changes to improve runway safety, including reconfiguring taxiway C and enhancing its lighting. A new ground radar system was installed to provide more precise aircraft positioning data. The FAA implemented new regulations to improve pilot training and air traffic control procedures. Airlines revamped training programs emphasizing scenario-based simulations and crew resource management. The legacy of Air Canada Flight 759 underscores the importance of vigilance and clear communication in aviation safety.